So record profits during a crisis, the COVID crisis, and while gas prices were at its highest. 91% of Democrats and 83% of Republicans want that bill to become the law of the land. And yet politicians would never look at it because it's going to put a lock on their own cage and limit their own power.
What can even be done about something like that?
I understand why people would feel like there's nothing that can be done. And as of yesterday, I would have agreed with you. But we really do believe this is the plan. And the more you learn, go on our website, learn about our blueprint, the more you hear our videos about us, the more you learn about what we plan to do. It just makes so much sense as the most viable, logical, ethical approach to fixing all these problems in a way that most Americans would agree with. That this is like the common sense of politics, makes sense that this is the direction that we should go. And it's just a matter of spreading the right awareness so people know how we're going to do it and what we're trying to accomplish.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Think Tank. This is the first episode of the Ask the Founder series. My name's Adrian. I'm a motion designer and illustrator, currently helping Think pretty much fulfill its destiny. I'm joined today with Travis. Travis, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Travis. I'm the founder and visionary Futures Now Coalition. Started the organization about 2 years ago out of the passion of just trying to change the system as it's heading in a very bad direction. And so here we are.
Okay, that's right. Travis here thinks he can bring about some pretty dramatic change, typically in the realm of politics. Now, I told him if you want to change any kind of political landscape, all you got to do is just pay your local politician billions of dollars and have them draft up legislation on your behalf. But Travis thinks that he has a better idea. He thinks that money in politics is a problem. In all seriousness, though, yes, money in politics, it's the problem. It's the big issue we're all facing today. It's a huge issue. Everyone knows it. I know it. You know it. Your grandma knows it. But Travis, can you tell us a little bit more about why it's such a problem?
Sure. So as you just mentioned, like most people know that corruption is such a fundamental issue, but they do still underestimate how bad it is. Unfortunately, especially now that I've been talking to a lot of different political leaders and other stakeholders, we're learning that even like at the local level is more corrupt than some of us might believe or have hoped. But yeah, so people know it. But, you know, for example, in 2019, the Center for Public Integrity and USA Today did an investigation and indicated that out of 10,000 bills that they researched, over 4,000 of them were written by the various industries that are meant to be the ones that are getting regulated by those bills. And then out of those over 4,000 bills, over 1,000 of them actually ended up signed into law. So these are bills that were meant to regulate an industry, and yet the industry that's being regulated are the ones that are writing these bills. And coincidentally, they're also the ones that donate it to the politicians. So, you know, situations like that. Another one is that in 2022, big oil, that was the time when oil prices have skyrocketed. It was actually the highest gas prices in modern history. And at that same year, they spent $124 million on federal lobbying. And at that same time, they had record profits. So record profits during a crisis, the COVID crisis, and while gas prices were at its highest. Like, why should it be gas at the highest and they're getting record profits during a crisis? It's not a good time to make record profits. It's ridiculous. And a side note to that, they actually get subsidized $20 billion a year. Our country subsidizes their cost of oil. $20 billion a year out of our taxes goes to big oil just to make them richer. They're already multi-billionaires, but we got to give them 20 billion more a year. Also in like 2017, there's the Asbestos Transparency Act. It was created to help people that are gaining cancer due to exposure to asbestos. And it turned out the corporations that are directly part of the asbestos production and use were the ones that wrote the bill. And it ultimately made it harder to get compensated. So if you got cancer from asbestos, this bill made it harder for you to get compensated for being harmed. And the last example here is just showing the private healthcare industry that they're just always flooding money into pretty much both parties, but more so the Democratic Party to ensure that Democrats don't fix our healthcare. In this last year, 2024, they donated $93 million. And during 2020, at the height and the beginning of the COVID epidemic, they gave $308 million. So why did they skyrocket their donations right when they had a push for who's making profits during these vaccines and all the whole situation? Just a sketchy time for private private healthcare insurances and big pharma to donate so much money.
Okay, now you're pretty much a numbers guy. You oftentimes cite statistics and studies whenever you bring up points like this, at least in our conversations, and you did so right now. You say a lot of people know that this whole money in politics issue is a problem. Do you have any hard numbers on that? Are there any statistics that show maybe a percentage of the population that know this?
Yeah, sure. So recently there was a Pew Research study showing that 85% of Americans believe that the cost of campaigns makes it so good people can't run for office. 84% of Americans say that special interest groups and lobbyists have too much say in what happens and they have just too much influence over what's going on. And then the last thing is just there's actually certain organizations trying to push for the Anti-Corruption Act, which we actually would support as well. It shows that 87% of Americans support this Anti-Corruption Act, which ultimately would get rid of money in politics, would end gerrymandering and a few other voting rights, but mostly around money in politics. And so 87% of Americans supporting that kind of a situation is 91% of Democrats and 83% of Republicans want that bill to become the law of the land. And yet politicians would never look at it because it's going to put a lock on their own cage and limit their own power.
Okay, so, but based on what you described, if it's all so corrupt, why should anybody actually care? What can even be done about something like that?
Sure. Yeah. That's a really good question. And one of the biggest fights right now is defeatism and people feeling like it's too broken to fix. Kind of ultimately over the last decade or so, that's been what people feel. People are less political than ever before in modern history. They don't trust the government. They don't trust the party leaders, the parties themselves. And a huge piece of that is the money in politics. But the problem is we've been ignoring this issue and it's getting worse. It's significantly getting worse. And everything from 2016 to now just shows the country barely even pretends that we're still in a democracy anymore. Dark money is now a big issue where it wasn't first Citizens United legalized corruption a decade ago, but then dark money started getting even more rampant. And dark money is untraceable money. It could even be a foreign leader giving money to politicians, and we don't know because it's just so untraceable. So long story short is we have to do something. It is going to just keep getting worse. We're close to environmental crisis, economic crisis, United Nations, any experts will tell you we're heading in a really bad direction. Society is going to fall apart at some point. People feel it and have different reasons why they think it's going to happen, but people feel it, that things are falling apart. And we truly believe that this is the answer. What we are offering to America is the answer. And it's not just we have the answers for all the policies, but the key of what we're doing is building cohesion among all the grassroots organizations. Everyone that's not part of the corrupt system can partake in what we're trying to accomplish. So we're calling it a meta movement, a movement of movements. There's already a money out of politics movement. There's a ranked choice voting movement. There's all sorts of different movements. And we want to build infrastructure that ties them all together under these common goals. They could separate on different issues on healthcare, climate change, whatever they want. But there's these core issues that we could all agree with, that over 87% of America can agree with. And we have a massive plan to build both technical infrastructure as well as socio-political infrastructure to organize and empower all these people and move us all in the same direction once and for all. Last thing on that is I understand why people would feel like there's nothing that can be done. And as of yesterday, I would have agreed with you. But we really do believe this is the plan. And the more you learn, go on our website, learn about our blueprint, the more you hear videos about us, the more you learn about what we plan to do. It just makes so much sense as the most viable, logical, ethical approach to fixing all these problems in a way that most Americans would agree with, that this is the common sense of politics, makes sense that this is the direction that we should go. And it's just a matter of spreading the right awareness so people know how we're going to do it and what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, that was a lot of information, but I want to focus on one key point out of everything you were just talking about there. You had mentioned Citizens United legalized corruption. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that was one of the big blows to democracy in recent history. So that was back in 2010. Citizens United was a Supreme Court decision that pretty much legalized corruption. It said that corporations are human beings with human rights. And so a corporation corporation has all the constitutional freedoms as a human being, as well as that money is considered freedom of speech. So not allowing a corporation to give billions of dollars to a politician would be infringing on their freedom of speech. And so that just ripped the roof off the top. It really changed everything. For the 20 years before Citizens United, they totaled $750 million was spent in elections. So over a span of 20 years, $750 million. After Citizens United, for over just a 10-year period, was spent $4.5 billion was spent now that there's no roof and no limit on corporate spending. And 963 million of that 4.5 billion is dark, untraceable money. So Citizens United was one of the worst decisions. There was some money coming in before that, and there's other bills that happened after that, but that was the worst blow to democracy.
Now, I want to clarify real quick to anybody who's listening. What Travis just described, Citizens United being like a Supreme Court decision that allowed corporations to give money to politicians as free speech. I want to emphasize that this did not take place in like 1895 monopoly times like it sounds like. This was 2010. So yes, things are just getting worse, if you ask me. I just want to emphasize that point. Okay, so before you had mentioned that there's all kinds of dark money and there's examples of legal corruption. So there's illegal and legal corruption that exists in our system. If that's the case, can you give any more examples of legal corruption?
So an example to your question is, I mentioned the healthcare industry earlier. I always target that because one, it's the number one industry that donates to Democrats. And why is that? Because Democrats are the most threatening to their profits. Democrats sometimes want Medicare for all, or at least a public option. All these different types of situations would cap the profits of the billion-dollar industries of big pharma and the health insurance industry. So that's why they invest millions of dollars every year to give Democrats money so that they don't fix our health care. Right now, the statistics show that 20% of money going into healthcare goes into just administration and profits of the private health insurance and big pharma. So 20% of the money, instead of saving lives and actually helping people, is just going towards wasted administrative costs and billionaires becoming more billionaires.
The fact that you have to specify that there's two different types of corruption in general speaks volumes. Like, oh, we're just dealing with the legal corruption. Never mind all the crazy stuff that goes on behind closed doors. That's insane. What? Okay, so what I can't wrap my mind around is, like, if it's so apparent, right? Like, if it's so apparent, what's the solution? Like, how did we get here? And like, just where do we go from here, right?
How we got here, just real quick with that. It started with the forefathers never imagined that there'd be these billion-dollar corporations back then. Like, it was just such a different world than where we live now. They expected America to evolve our Constitution over time. And decades ago, we used to do that. That's what amendments are for. But it eventually slowed down and halted. We're supposed to keep evolving it. As society progresses, we're supposed to progress the Constitution and general government. They talk about it. It's supposed to be we're trying to strive for a more perfect union. We're human. We're never going to be perfect, but the goal should always be striving towards perfection, or at least improving ourselves. And we got away from that. We haven't been improving the system in a long time.
So is that who's really in control then? Corporations, like corporate entities and such?
You could say that, it's not as black and white as we'd want to believe, but essentially there's just a lot of different wealthy corporations, wealthy people, and what it just boils down to is the more money you have, the more influence you could have on politics. So it's not like there's 5 or 10 people in a room deciding the fate of America, but there's like thousands of corporations that are pooling money. They have lobbies that they work together on, like Big Oil has several different big oil companies that funnel into like one or a handful of lobbyist groups. It is, yes, corporations and the wealthiest have just such a overabundance of influence on politics, but it's more of like a cloud of people. Those industries, from their perspective, they want to pay less taxes. They want to have less regulations. They don't want to spend extra money recycling a chemical when they could could just dump it in our drinking water. And, with capitalism, they're going to want to do whatever gets them the best profits, and they're only going to look out for their own perspective. And the point of government is to balance that, where, we want corporations to succeed, but not to the point where, if you're dumping in drinking water and people are getting cancer, maybe they need to spend more money and put it somewhere more safe, kind of a thing. So it's just kind of that greed, and the ultra wealthy have common interests, common desires of less taxes, less regulation. They don't want the average worker's salaries to go up, minimum wage, things like that. And so they're always going to invest in making sure that they have pure freedom to do what they want. And then there's just a lot of the commonalities between these industries that can pool their resources and money and power together to move legislation in that direction.
Okay. So you've identified then that it's corporate entities and the ultra wealthy trying to gain influence over government. But wouldn't something like that, or isn't something like that, illegal?
Unfortunately, no. You can't just give money to a politician to personally enrich them. But since Citizens United passed, they pretty much decided that corporations have unlimited spending and that they could spend any amount of money they want towards campaigns. So the politicians can't put it in their savings account. But right now, the race is really raising as much money as you can for your campaign so you beat the other candidate. They can't personally benefit in their pocket, but also at the same time, they can use that campaign spending to go on a vacation. They could do fancy $10,000 dinners. The gift laws are a little tight, but it could beef up their lifestyles and whatnot. But most of that money is going directly towards their campaigns and not directly in their pocket. But it's legal, which is the problem. But it's just as influential as illegal corruption.
Okay, so you've identified a problem. You've identified several people who are involved directly in the problem. That sounds like an insurmountable task, given how overblown these issues are. You're essentially trying to put air in space right now. That's how impossible your task sounds. So you've identified the culprits. What's the solution? What are you going to do to change it?
Sure. So to get it, what got it to this point is just the money. From the beginning, money was able to kind of seep in, and then comes that Citizens United decision, blew the roof off the top, and then it just keeps getting progressively worse. There's the campaign finance laws are getting looser and looser. Now there's dark money where it's completely untraceable of where that money's coming from to go to a politician, and so the policies are just getting worse and worse. But more importantly, to your other question about this being insurmountable, it's huge undertaking. Many organizations have been trying for decades to get money out of politics. There's different attempts to solutions like a constitutional amendment and other things. And it's just not feasible. It's not realistic at this stage. So what we're doing that's different is it's a multidimensional, multidisciplinary approach. We're tying psychology, technology, politics, and general representation all together to come up with this massive, comprehensive plan. We call it the Blueprint to Upgrade Democracy. So it entails both stopgap solutions and endgame solutions. Stopgap meaning what we could do now that'll start moving it in the right direction. And then the endgame solutions are like that constitutional amendment, ranked choice voting, and a couple other things that we want to incorporate into democracy that the majority of Americans agree upon. But that's going to take 20, 30 years to get to. And it can't get there unless the stopgap solutions happen. So some examples of the stopgap solutions is both with our digital democracy and our digital politics concepts. So digital democracy is going to be the tech platform that we're building. It's going to be literally the digital embodiment of America's democracy, having a one-stop shop for all politics, showcase all politicians equally so that, whether you raise $50,000 or $50 million, you're going to be showcased the same. You're going to have the same voice on this platform. And so it's the power of how you resonate with the citizens, the power of what you're saying, the promises you're keeping, your history in legislation. That's going to take you further through citizens understanding who you are and going viral, essentially, the way technology works. Another piece to that is there'll be politician report cards where there'll be accountability, where if a politician is taking money from something that's a conflict of interest, you'll actually be able to see this black and white on their comparable report card. So you could see if you care about healthcare and you see they took $200,000 from the private health insurance industry, you know they're going to have a conflict of interest and they might not do what you want them to do, even if they promise it. You know, these days promises kind of mean nothing with politicians. It just lip service to get a vote, but then when they're in office, it almost never happens anymore. But now with the permanent report cards, we're actually going to track their promises. Are they delivering on their promises once they're in office? Stuff like that, as well as the financial information. So this will actually act as a deterrent for voters to not want to vote or not want to donate to that candidate because they're taking bad kinds of like big money, dark money, and things like that. And really show them that help Americans pick somebody that truly represents them. We don't care where they stand on policies. That's up for America and the citizens where they want whatever policies they want, that's up to them. We just want to match them to somebody that's truly going to represent what they want for policies and not just give them lip service and go a different direction. So that's the tech side of it. And then the other side of it, digital politics, is our reframing of politics or political infrastructure that we'd be building. And that's to basically revolutionize the campaign process. It really takes the implications of what this technology can do and really incorporate it into society, into everyday living, really help people understand how big of a deal this can be, how much this can change the system, as well as changing it within Congress and moving new politicians in a new direction where they're focusing less on dialing for dollars and more focusing on actually representing the people, having consistent scores of fulfilling their promises. They should be giving America what America wants. And right now there's a net zero correlation between public opinion and government action. But going back, so digital democracy is going to be the centralized tool to bring everyone in one place. And then digital politics is the reframing how we would look at politics and how candidates would run their campaigns. So, you know, as I'm saying with this issue, they need to raise millions of dollars. Why? Because it really boils down to advertising. They need to spend millions of dollars so their voters see who they are. And that's another statistic that shows that, like, people tend to vote. First, it's party lines. If you belong to a certain party, that's usually where you stand. But the second highest effect is name recognition and how often you heard that person's name. And so they raise millions of dollars to advertise themselves. So you see commercials of them. So you learn who they are. You see their name. They can have campaigns and people going door to door, stuff like that. But so what we're doing with digital politics and digital democracy is streamlining the process, directly connecting the politicians to the citizens. So you don't need millions of dollars. You could be you could be the favorite teacher that all your students love, decide to run for Senate. You go right to our platform, you sign up, and we're going to help you have a voice. We're going to give you a voice to show, can you resonate with the American people? Are your policies and promises something that America wants? And you don't need to raise millions of dollars. You could have, whether you make $50,000 or $50 million, you're going to be treated the same on this platform. And it's the power of resonating with the people, going viral in terms of social media is what will bring you up in the ranks. So that's ultimately what will change the system. Is we're bypassing the need for all that big money. And in addition to that, there's going to be permanent report cards. So not only are we bypassing the need for the big donors, but actually having money from big donors or dark money, untraceable money, the report card's going to show it. So we're actually going to create deterrence that you'll actually see their democracy score will actually go down because they have conflicts of interest in their finances. And so those are just some of the many different plans that we have. There's a lot of other things to go into, but that's some of the fundamental reasons or the strategy of how to bypass it. It's adding these deterrents where people will see the dark money of these candidates and the conflicts. It's about bypassing the need. So instead of needing to advertise, everyone's going to be laid out right there, showcased equally, give them debates, give them Q&As, virtual town halls. just directly connecting the American people to their politicians. And then this also ultimately changes the American people's voting habits. And like, that's what everything boils down to the voting. If we could change who people are voting for, that changes the entire system from the bottom up. And so this information will inevitably change who people vote for in the long run.
Okay, so this is all going to be provided on some type of digital platform.
Yes, on the digital democracy platform.
Okay, yeah. So you're a tech company. Is that what I'm gathering here?
No, so that's a common misconception. So we're really a socio-political organization. Our big focus is the psychology behind it, the politics behind it, really engaging America directly, helping them actually build this platform themselves. This is actually going to be a citizen-owned tech platform. We're going to gift it to America. And so one day we're not going to have ownership of this technology. We're going to keep campaigning on this new concept of digital politics. We're going to keep building this meta movement and gain different partners and move everyone towards this goal of having a healthier democracy. But the tech itself is going to be gifted to America, built by America. We're going to be powering up different devs across the country and other people with different skill sets to build this platform. But us ourselves, like there's some key features that need to happen for this platform to make such an impact. But other than making sure certain features are done, making sure there's a healthy checks and balance, that the American people have power over this platform, it's really not, we're not going to be in the nitty gritty of the technology.
Okay, so now this system that you're talking about, which I would look up a politician and see if they align with my views, and I would kind of cast my vote in their direction. These are not candidates that you're choosing, correct? These would just be people that you're spotlighting, essentially.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, and everyone's like, we're not cutting anyone out. So at first we know the establishment candidates are not going to jump in. Eventually they are. They're going to learn that they have to be on this platform, but we're trying to get everyone. And by everyone, Democrat, Republican, third party, good party candidates, independents. We want to get everyone in there. We want to build a better democracy where independents and third parties can actually be taken seriously and become viable candidates. And so that's part of this plan as well.
Okay, so using your platform, and I was kind of tapping into this earlier, but I'm going to ask it in a different way. How do I so I would be presented a politician who aligns with my views and whatever kind of alignments I have. Is this something that I like click a button to say, I like this? Is this something that I like get assigned to a profile that I follow? Like, how does this work exactly?
Sure. And for the record, anyone watching this, we do have a demo of what a politician profile looks like, but essentially to go through the whole process. So basically there's one of the big features that we're creating is called the political matchmaker. So it's kind of like a dating service. You would answer these questions. Where do you stand on healthcare? And then how important is that policy to you? And then where do you stand on climate change? How important is that to you? Where do you stand on gun violence? So on, so on. And then once you do that, we're going to show you all the candidates that are running in your district, but we're going to show you a percentage of match of how closely aligned are they with the policies that you stand for. And so you'll be able to see them. There'll be a comparison, a side-by-side comparison to compare all the candidates. So essentially, like, we don't care if you agree on a different side of, let's say, gun violence than where I agree. We don't care about that. Like, we're completely objective, nonpartisan. We want you to find who resonates with you the best. The only thing that we're kind of dissuading you from is those people that are the conflicts of interest. So again, like if you really cared about, you want like Medicare for all and then you voted for somebody that says they're for healthcare, but we're going to highlight that, hey, just so you know, they're taking $200,000 from the healthcare insurance industry. So might be a conflict of interest there. So that's the only sway we're pushing on. But like Democrat, Republican, third party, independent, like we want to empower all the candidates and then let America decide who shines the best and all that.
Why is it that these random rock star politicians show up and they're making all these promises and they're going to bring about dramatic change, but the moment they get in office, they suddenly become ineffectual? Now, I understand that different branches of the government make it different. You know, there are checks and balances. It makes it difficult for certain people in certain areas to do their job correctly. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how does money affect this? Why does the money in politics affect a politician's performance?
Yeah, sure. And with that, like the key uniqueness about how we're bringing this narrative to fruition is that, you know, it's not the politician's fault necessarily. Like it's a hard one to kind of look around, but like pretty much the politicians have to either play the game of politics or not be a politician. You could ask any successful politician, there was a point in their lives where, like, you know, many of them started very hopeful, like, oh, I'm going to be the one that changes the system. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to do the right thing. But then they slowly learned, like, I need millions of dollars in order to have any chance of winning in my election. And so they slowly get more and more compromised. And, you know, they're in their own mentality. They're like, well, you know, I might not be able to do all my promises. Maybe I only get 10 or 15% of my promises into office. But, you know, if I don't run and I don't take all that money, just my opponent's going to win and they're not going to do as good stuff as I am. So at least I'm going to get 10, 15% of the stuff done rather than none of it done. So that's a lot of some of the mentality that it be. So we can't totally blame them. They also aren't the ones that caused we were all born into a flawed democracy, and like, yeah, it's getting worse, but it's kind of the system was already there. So point is that it's the system itself is to blame rather than the politicians themselves. But like, so there's really important statistics. Like the average politician spends 20 to 30 hours a week having to dial for dollars and attend like high priced events instead of interacting with the American people. So, you know, like the average senator that's up for re-election needs $2,400 a day, and members of the House, since they have to re-elect every 2 years, they need $3,400 a day in order to stand any chance of having enough money to win their next election. So they're forced to just have millions and millions of dollars to stand any kind of a chance. And another unfortunate statistic is that 88% of U.S. congressional races are won by the candidate that raised the most money. So it doesn't matter if their promises are good. It doesn't matter if they're resonating with the people. It's strictly that if you spent the most money on your campaign, you're the one that's going to win. And so that's the trap these people are in. And that's the trap that we're going to break with our new infrastructure. You know, what we're trying to offer America is not just for the citizens themselves. It's to give rise to good politicians. We just want to streamline the relationship between the constituents and the politicians. So you don't need millions of dollars to show who you are, to show what your promises are. You're going to get showcased equally on this platform. So if we could just funnel all citizens in one place and all politicians in one place, you don't need millions of dollars. You just need to be good at your job, good at representing America, good at following through in your promises, build a good history, and that'll get you farther. So we want to lift that burden, that financial burden that politicians have. And that's the only way they're going to stop taking that kind of money.
Okay, so again, putting all the power back into the people's hands. But what incentivizes politicians and organizations to work with you in particular? Like, what do they benefit? How do they benefit from this system that you're proposing?
So especially for the grassroots candidates and organizations, pretty much we're highlighting them, giving them a much louder voice. So like right now, third parties and independents are not taken seriously whatsoever. The mainstream media virtually never has them on camera. If they do, it's almost like a joke or like a side thing, or like, oh, haha, that's funny. You think you're going to win. So the system is just so stacked against them. And we're going to get into that in another episode about manufactured consent and how the media plays a part in the misrepresentation of these candidates. But the statistics show that 63% of Americans want third parties to succeed as of this year. It's just because the system's so stacked against them, and also the way it's being framed is causing the problems. But so what we're doing is we're reaching out to third parties, independents. We just partnered with goodparty.org recently, and we want those candidates to be on this platform because we dream of a system where just every candidate is lined up. You have a clear voice directly to your citizens to say why you are the best candidate for the job. Again, bypassing that need to raise millions of dollars. You know, for a while, they'll still have to have a traditional campaign for people outside of our platform. But our goal is just to constantly gain more and more America onto this platform. We win when like 80, 90, 100% of Americans are using this this platform for their own choices. And then there's no need for money. If everyone just showcase the same, then you find out who's resonating. This is going to organize them virtually. There'll be town halls for the politicians. There's going to be like Q&As. We'll have a donation mechanism so you could donate directly to a politician. There's just going to forever be more and more tools involving this. Eventually we'll get into organizers and volunteers for each of these candidates and matching them up. Create a big network where everyone can interconnect. Another example is like, so if you wanted to be an independent candidate, we would show you different organizations that can help you get started. We're going to help candidates start their virtual campaign. But for example, goodparty.org, what they're trying to do is run independent candidates, help them start a campaign from scratch in the traditional sense. So we would match organizations like that. So, hey, we're going to set you up virtually on a campaign, but then you could contact these different types of organizations. They'll help you do a traditional campaign and basically pooling different resources. Most people in this country want us to move in this direction. They just need to have the awareness, and we need to build this big infrastructure that connects all these dots together, and then everything's kind of in one place to help one another. That's what's going to benefit these candidates. Once we're popular enough, we'll have debates where all candidates can be debating. It's not just the two establishment picks, but it could be like a third party's debating an independent, is debating like pretty much anyone that's running in a certain race can all be in that debate. So we would host debates in the future and just so much more. And so it definitely benefits the candidates themselves.
Okay, so then if Republicans and Democrats are both bad, which is what you're suggesting, who exactly are we, the American people, supposed to vote for? Because according to my 6th grade U.S. history education, the last time any third party or outside the political binary party was actually successful was Teddy Roosevelt with the Bull Moose Party, and that solely existed to siphon votes away from the candidate he didn't want to win. What do we do? Who are we supposed to vote for?
Yeah, so that's really a fundamental question that we're working through. There's pretty much two key factors. There's one is knowing who has a conflict of interest. Because, while most Democrats and most Republicans have a massive amount of conflicts of interest, it's not 100% of them. It is most, but there are these grassroots movements that have come to rise here and there where there are certain politicians that swore off any kind of corporate money. They swore off all super PAC money, and they just take small dollar donations, kind of like what we're doing. The beauty of what we're designing, both technical infrastructure and political infrastructure, is that America is going to kind of decide from here where this is going to evolve. We are going to build a system that showcases all politicians equally. So we are going to add independents and third parties to the mix, along with those grassroots candidates that are in the Democrat and Republican Party, and maybe other situations that can arise. We're not the ones that are going to dictate for America where they're going to go, but we're going to build the infrastructure that allows them to come to a consensus around what direction it's going to lean towards. So the first step is giving all politicians opportunities. So again, whether they're independent, third party, or in the two major parties, they're all going to be showcased equally. We're going to build debate structures so they can actually debate in the elections instead of just the two main candidates. That's one piece to it. The other piece to it is that we're going to track the viability of these candidates. Because one of the biggest things that prevent people from voting for who they ideally want is the viability. So for example, you might be so in love with a candidate, but they have a 1% chance of winning, where you have another candidate that you're not really excited about it, but they have an 80% chance or 60% chance to win. So you're gonna vote for them because you don't want to, you're always told that voting for somebody that has a 1% chance is a waste of vote. So that's fundamentally what traps us into this two-party system. But so what FiNC is planning to do with this DD platform is show you in real time the viability of a candidate. So if a third party candidate is talking to their constituents and they're gaining viralness and America is liking them, they're supporting them, they're donating, they're following, you're going to see that in real time on this platform. So you'll actually see their popularity rising. Right now, the media downplays anyone that's not in the status quo. They're going to say, oh, that person would never win. Even if every statistic shows that they would win in every situation, which kind of happened back in 2020 with Bernie, where he was super popular in every statistic. And yet media constantly said, oh, no one wants him. No one's going to vote for him. No one's going to take him seriously. But none of the polls showed that. So with us on this platform, you'll see real time who is viable, who can actually win in the general election. We're even going to, by the next general election, we're going to have digital primaries where we'll run candidates. You'll see a debate with an independent, a third party, and possibly Democrat and Republican, grassroots, non-establishment Democrat and Republicans. They'll debate, and then we'll actually host a voting system, a ranked choice voting system. America could decide, without wasting your vote, you could choose who is the ideal candidate for you. This is before the general election, so you're not wasting a vote. But if you had your choice, would you vote for the third party or would you vote for that independent? So we would get a clear answer of where does America lie prior to the general election. So in certain seats, maybe in a Senate seat, there's a place where an independent wins. In another seat, a third party wins. But in another seat, we might show that no one's going to beat the two status quo candidates. And maybe you don't want to waste your vote and you'd rather vote for the lesser of two evils. That'll be your choice. But at least we'll have a very clear representation of the chances of these candidates winning. And as they're building popularity, our algorithms and everything will help them gain more support, have their voice heard, and show how much traction they could truly have.
Okay. That's a very comprehensive explanation. And a lot of it makes sense. The issue is that's not how our system works. How could you possibly implement a system like this when it's almost the exact opposite of what our politicians and acting government actually wants? How would you go about getting something like this up and running when the powers that be don't want you to?
Yeah, so great question. To start off with, they're not going to want to do this. They're not going to be our friends anytime soon. And that includes the party leaders, the two parties in general. Mainstream media is going to be against us. Pretty much those that are in the billionaire class and some millionaire class are going to find this very threatening, and they're going to pretty much stop at nothing to prevent this from happening. So a big piece of that is really the digital politics reframe of politics. And so there's a few different examples of that. One is we're building this meta movement. It's a movement of movements, a movement of organizations, nonprofits, other political organizations. The key categories that would be involved in this is political organizations and nonprofits, independent journalists, and underdog politicians, and then the average citizen. And so the idea is that we might not be in power. We're going to have the majority on our side. Most Americans agree with what FiNC wants to create, and we just need to bring the awareness to America. But what we want to do is really common sense politics. We want to create what America thinks that democracy should be all this time, and really shaping it for the digital age and what would make sense for today. And really, it's like we're building a new system outside of the current system, but then inviting people to this new system. And then once more voters are influenced by this new way, it turns everything upside down. If it changes the way people vote, it changes the entire infrastructure, changes who's in power, changes who are the candidates. So everything gets flipped over upside down. So the idea is having one centralized platform that's for the people, by the people, and you'll have all the politicians in one place, all journalists in one place, political organizations, really centralizing grassroots efforts and centralizing, just putting everyone in one area so money is not the impact. You don't need to raise millions of dollars to be heard. You just have to be representing the people to be heard. So bringing them all on one platform and also shifting this narrative. We're going to be working with independent journalists and these underdog politicians to shift things in this better direction. For example, third-party candidates and independents, right now it's almost impossible for them to win. So they're all invested to want to change the system. They know how broken the system is. They want it to be changed. So they're going to want to work with us. They're going to want this to succeed. And as it's known, the latest polls are showing that 63% of Americans do want third parties and independents to win. And it's just the framing and the psychology makes it so we don't do it. It's both the money in politics, it's the media biases, and just generally how the establishment frames what's going on, moves us in a certain direction. So the idea is just to bring grassroots groups together under one under the common ground of getting money out of politics and wanting for true citizen representation and things like that.
Okay. That sounds great. That sounds like a bunch of sunshine and rainbows, but I guess the ultimate question that it comes back down to is what started this whole thing. Who's funding this? Who's going to foot that bill for what you're proposing?
Sure. So the irony, too, about this is that we only need a fraction of the amount of money that gets donated to politicians to get diverted into the concept of democracy itself. So, for example, for the cost of 2 Senate campaigns, would be enough for our funding for the next year and continued on. So right now there's billions and billions of dollars getting donated every year to politicians. Yes, most of it's the dark money, but there's also plenty of billions that are coming from grassroots people, small dollar donations. So essentially, we just, instead of donating to a certain candidate, a certain party, doing it on an individual level, if you fund just democracy as a whole and funding the platform of digital democracy, we can showcase all the politicians for the cost of like the 2 politicians. And then we showcase everyone equally. So the system was always upside down to begin with, where it doesn't make sense that we always give money to one person, give money to the other person, when we should just be giving it to one entity that shows everyone. And so we would showcase everyone would have the voice and say what they want to say, win the people over by their own fruition. The answer in short is that we are looking for small dollar donations, similar to a lot of the grassroots campaigns that exist today. And if we could raise as much as like a Senate or 2 campaign, that'll be enough to keep everything afloat. As well as there's a lot of revenue plans in the long run that will actually bring this it'll start moving towards a self-sustainable system as it progresses and grows.
So you're operating outside of the political paradigm. You've got a source of funding. You're going to have a political movement, essentially. How do you get Americans to trust you? Because, again, they've been promised a lot of things in the past. But then you come along, the one person who's come up with a solution to this whole, again, political hellscape we find ourselves in. How am I supposed to trust you? How is anybody? I mean, look around you. The world is literally falling apart. Climate crisis, right? Economic crisis, but we're not supposed to talk about half of this stuff. So, sell me here,
Sure. Yeah. So trust is actually one of the fundamental pieces that we are focusing on. We're going to win by proving how trustworthy we are, building our checks and balance system at a fundamental level, both legally, psychologically, the way we present everything. This would not succeed without the trust. So we are going to prove the trust. We're going to prove nonpartisanship, unbiased, all that stuff. So to start with that, so for example, the digital democracy platform is going to be citizen owned. So the idea of that is that every American will be able to opt into an equal ownership stake of the technology. So digital democracy would be owned literally by the people for the people. Imagine like everyone has like 1 share of a stock, something like that. So everyone has equal decision-making power, voting power. Pretty much when you turn 18, you register to vote and you register for ownership of DD. So the idea is that building a political system externally where every American will have equal voting power to elect people that are going to run this technology. So once FiNC gets this on its feet, we're actually going to gift this to America, and America will vote on who continues to run the technology, keeps developing the technology, and forever keeps maintaining it. And the idea is to have a private entity that forever oversees our public election system as like this watchdog, as something that's just always going to give an extra checks and balance from government, but it's owned by the people for the people, but on the private sector instead of the public sector. So that's one of the main reasons that we would start building trust with America. The other piece to it is just massive amount of transparency and engagement with America. So DD is going to be citizen owned. FiNC is going to be more employee owned, where everyone that's in the company is more the checks and balance. So even myself, I just get a set salary. Everyone in the company is going to have set salaries. We're doing nothing with profits, nothing with bonuses or commissions. And so everyone just has a set salary. It's going to be transparent. America can always look this up, see what kind of money we're making. And then even with my salary itself, that my employees are going to choose my salary. I'm not. I have to come to them, showing them my report card, how am I performing as the leader, and then they get to choose the salaries. So those are just some of the initial infrastructure, but we're going to just keep building on this. So there's just just massive amount of transparency. We're going to constantly be engaging America. We're going to be doing focus groups and polling, asking America how should we move forward. We're going to pretty much build this with America from the ground up, from step one. We want to know that America is comfortable in every decision we make, and also build that legal system that kind of forces us to be as transparent and accountable as we want it to be, and like make it so that we can't like change our mind later, for example.
Based on all that, what's the next step for FiNC? How do people get involved?
Sure. So right now we're at this major awareness stage. So the idea is we just need more people to know what we're doing. I've been face to face with over 1,000 people. Thousands now visit our website, but we need to get those numbers up. We need to spread awareness. So if America can like our posts, share us on social media, tell your friends, tell your family. Again, the more you learn about what we're trying to do, the more excited you're most likely going to be. You're going to just see how viable this is, how ethical. It just makes so much common sense in what we're trying to build. And so we've learned enough that like as America knows what we do, they are very much interested in what we have to say and what we have to offer. And right now the whole key is just spreading that awareness, getting more and more people aware of this. And that's what we're calling our breakout moment, is that over the next couple months, as we have better content really explaining how we're going to change the world and, you know, making it easier for people to understand what we're doing, we're going to go more and more viral. And then this breakout moment is when we're starting to really get into the mainstream, being viral on social media, start showing up in different media posts and different journalists doing stories about us. And then that's going to be our breakout moment where we have enough awareness in the country and to really get the funding that we need. We're all grassroots funded, so we're $5, $10 at a time. That's another way to help us, is giving the $5-10 or more if you have it. But just spreading that awareness and getting enough people to give that $5-10, it's going to scale up very quickly and we're going to grow exponentially. And then that breakout moment really gets us on our feet, where we have enough, we have the right funding to really enact everything that we have planned. And the last thing is just visiting our website at futureis.org to join the Meta movement. If you go right to our homepage, you'll see a little brief about the mission, and then there'll be an option to join the Meta movement where you could give your information. We'll keep you updated on the developments of the technology and the movement itself. And that's pretty much the best ways to help us, just getting more people to be aware of what we're accomplishing.
I guess you kind of already touched on it earlier, so not to recap too much. What's the next step for FiNC? Where do we need to go from here?
Yeah, so right now, over the next couple months, we're hoping to reach that breakout moment. We're finishing getting the right videos to explain what we're doing. This podcast is a part of that, building the right partnerships. This breakout moment is about gaining awareness and having the American people start learning what we're doing, help this go viral, help get our donations up. Again, $5, $10 at a time is all it would take, because there's enough people that would love this and they just need to be aware of it. And so we're just lining up the right content to explain what we're doing as concisely as possible and clearly as possible, because that's always been the hardest challenge, is like we have such a complex mission. You know, changing the world is going to be complicated, so I can't just explain in 5 minutes, but you know, we're coming up with really great videos these days. We have a phenomenal, talented, passionate team that's been putting these new videos together and just updating how we're explaining everything, as well as these partnerships we're working with. So the next step is really reaching that breakout moment so we could get fully on our feet, flesh out the rest of the legal stuff, get the technology on board to the finish line, and all that. So we hope America really joins in with us, follows us, donates to us. We're feeling very hopeful that in the next couple months, we're going to start showing up in the mainstream America.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. All media, when it's made by a person, is going to inherently be biased. It's going to tell the truth through the lens of whoever's crafting it. And this becomes a problem when the truth is hidden through lies or obfuscation, and the mainstream media and other independent media sources are accused of this all of the time. Next time, we're going to be asking Travis, how does that bias affect him? And if you'd like to learn more about our mission, stay up to date, or donate to the cause, you can find it all at futureis.org.